Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's edition of the American Mussar Community Gathering. This will be our first week studying and exploring the soul trait of enthusiasm, also known as alacrity. We will explain what that means and how it applies. For now, we're going to start the way we always do with a short meditation. So I invite you to close your eyes and relax and take in a deep breath through the nose and hold. Exhale through the mouth and hold. And again, inhale through the nose and hold. And exhale through the mouth and hold. If thoughts should come into your head, please observe them and watch them pass, like watching a car move by on the road. Now is not the time for solving problems. Right now, all you need to do is inhale through the nose and hold, and exhale through the mouth and hold. And on your next inhale, say to yourself, Shema. And on the exhale, listen. Shema, listen. In Shema, we're listening deeply, without judgment, without offering advice. In Shema, we are listening with an open heart. Shema, listen. And when you are ready, you may open your eyes. Right. I love seeing who has arrived when my eyes were closed. So we can say hello to Martin and John and Sarah and David and Guy. So nice to see you all. Glad you could be here. Hey, Nico. Okie dokie. So let's get into it. Um, okay, so um, I mentioned there are two different translations for the Hebrew word. There are multiple translations, and one is alacrity, and the other one is another one is enthusiasm. And they have kind of different meanings in English. So I wanted to talk those through a little bit before we get into the meaning in the Musar context. So what do you think? How are these two things different?
From enthusiasm.
Liam.
Well, as far as I understand it, I thought alacrity had to do with speed and movement, where
Mhm.
enthusiasm was more um, I wouldn't say how interested you are in doing something, but it's not quite that, but the energy you have behind doing
Mhm.
something.
Yeah.
So yeah, one seems more in the physical realm, and one seems more in the mental realm.
Hmm. Yeah. I love that. And I think that the way you define the two of those, it's kind of the Hebrew word is zerazut, and we don't usually use Hebrew, but sometimes it's useful to remember that we are using English approximations for a concept which was developed in another language.
Workplace. Okay.
And this zerazut is kind of the combination of the two. It has the okay, let's get to it part of alacrity. We're not going to mess around. We're just going to do what we need to do. And it has that emotional resonance. And sometimes Enthusiasm we can think of as kind of the rah piece, and it's definitely a little bit more energy. And here, though, if you have that kind of energy towards something, it will help you do it. Um, does that
Your
make
battery is
sense?
running low. Close.
Questions or comments? All right, well, let us take it a little bit deeper then. Both of those things have in common this idea of taking action, which is a big part of it. And we're going to get to that definition of enthusiasm in a sec. Um, but this Mussar cycle, we're going back to this idea of the four assumptions for our Mussar practice. And for those of you who are newer to the practice, this is something that I came up with when I was first developing my Mussar, my first Mussar classes. And I was just recently out of the corporate world. And when I was in product management and we had to do these financial forecasts, you would create these forecasts and have assumptions. So if 100 people come to the store an hour and each one spends $10 on average, then we'll make $1,000 an hour and we're open 10 hours a day. So we'll make $10,000 a day. Now, maybe that's the true, maybe it's not, but by making those assumptions, you can start moving forward and managing the business. And so here, because I wanted Mussar to be as accessible to people as possible, and not everyone has had an extensive Jewish education, I wanted to create these assumptions so that people could just use, and maybe they agreed, maybe they didn't, but if they assumed that these were correct, it will help you move forward with the practice. So the second one is particularly relevant to this week. May I have asked someone to unmute and read the second bullet in bold, and then we'll stop and talk about it.
We all have free will, but it is not always accessible.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Eileen. Okay, I'm going to stop the share so we can see each other. So I'm also going to put it in the chat so you can think about your comments or questions. My first question is, what does this mean? What is it talking about? Or what parts don't you understand or agree with? Martin.
When would free will not be accessible?
Well, let me turn that to the group. When might free will not be accessible? Nico.
I know my free will is not accessible, sorry, when I react with emotion and instead of replying with my whole self, when I react with ego, when I react with, any, I don't know, anger, selfishness, that kind of thing, just the negative, toxic parts. That's when you then kick yourself and say, why did I do that? Why did I say that? You shouldn't have, but in the moment, that clarity is not always there. Free will, that's where I'm getting at, I guess. Free will implies clarity, and it's like saying in a perfect free market, everything is balanced, etc. But we know it doesn't really work that way. Free will is sort of the same thing to me. It should work, but any perturbation, any glitch in the system will make it not work.
Okay,
Very well said. Thank you, Nico.
I would say. Thank you.
Kat, what are your thoughts?
My immediate reaction was I was going to say if I'm freaking out or depressed,
Hmm.
and then just thinking beyond myself, if people are oppressed or imprisoned in any way, they are could be so down that they will not be able to access that free will.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I see a commonality for both of your answers when, emotions become more in play. It is just, it can be harder to kind of access that free will. Any other comments? I mean, does anyone disagree with this? Yeah, Nico. You can remember to unmute, please.
Sorry about that. It also makes me think that it is partly a cop out to say that, oh, I did this or that because I was angry or because you can also say, well, as long as you were saying, you're not in prison, then you do have free will. You do have the free will to not let your emotions take over, and the free will to let your better self shine all the time.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
it is also a question of choice to not let yourself be or do that.
Mhm. Yeah, what I'm hearing is implied by what you're saying is okay, well, even if that's true, how do we prevent ourselves from getting to that point where, maybe we can't access the free will?
Yes.
Beth and then Toby.
Um, most of us are old enough not to really succumb to peer pressure so much anymore. But even as adults, we experience peer pressure. I don't know about men, but I know that women who get involved in a romantic relationship can be very suggestible. And without realizing it, we give up our free will. And um, sometimes it takes quite a lot of effort and work to come out of that situation. It's almost as if we've been friendly kidnapped.
Hmm.
We've gone into it willingly, but then it gets out of our control.
Hmm.
And that's a situation when we do not have free will.
Hmm.
Teenagers, same thing with their buddies, everybody's wearing X brand. I want to have X brand, which of course is not that active with this group of people, but you may have children or grandchildren who are going through that.
Thank you, Beth. Thank you. Yeah. Toby.
Sometimes, sometimes people don't perceive the number of choices that are actually available.
Right.
In other words, there may be 20 choices that you could pick,
Mhm.
but because of their upbringing and their input, their peer pressure, and however they were brought up, or their congenital issues, if they have mental health issues, they may not be able to perceive all 20 of those options and make a reasonable choice.
Yeah, thank you, Toby. And your example made me think of a related example is sometimes people may not perceive that they have a choice, or they may say, I don't have a choice. I either do this immoral thing or I would lose my job. It's like, well, that is a choice. You can, yeah, I mean, if the thing is bad enough, there are circumstances when you probably should take the job loss. So, those are never easy. And sometimes, people can find themselves, with a lot of regret over the choices they made. So that kind of comes into play too. I think part of the um, opportunity that Mussar offers us is to become more aware of our choices, to become more aware of, you know, 3 through 18 on Toby's list that maybe we hadn't even realized were there. And I heard I'm really loving Angela Bookdahl's memoir right now. She's a rabbi at Central Synagogue, Korean mom, Jewish dad, really amazing person. But what was it? Oh, shoot. Now, what was it that she said? Sometimes we might make a choice which isn't in line with our values, but at least we make it knowingly. Sometimes we're like, I really, to use a trivial example, I know I should not have the fourth cookie, but sometimes I'm doing it. Sometimes it's much more serious, but that's, one of my weaknesses that I will fall into, which doesn't have terrible immediate consequences. But anyway, I think it could follow me. Now, if we don't have access to our free will, we're upset, depressed, whatever, does that let us off the hook for the consequences of our actions? I'm seeing some head shaking. Does anyone want to comment on why you might feel that way? We've got Lila here. Yes, Beth.
I love the tale. I'm sorry. Uh, um, well, even King David was subject to the consequences when he made bad decisions. I mean, Bathsheba got pregnant, the child died, he was overwhelmed with sorrow while the child was sick. But once the child died, he had a good mindset. Then he said, well, there's nothing I can do about it. The child's dead now. Before I could pray and I could reach out to God. But he suffered those consequences. And even when we don't have control of our will, whether because of emotions or influenced by others, we're still going to suffer those consequences. And they're not going to be wonderful.
Thank you, Beth. Yeah, it's not a free pass. And one thing that King David did in that example, and that's a good one, is he also took responsibility for his actions. Yeah, okay, well, let's go a little bit deeper here. Let's see. So if someone could read the first two bullets, please.
Enthusiasm, also known as energy, alacrity, diligence, zeal. Alacrity covers beginning tasks and completing tasks.
Okay, great. So let's talk about those two, beginning tasks and completing tasks. How are they different? And why might we need enthusiasm or zeal or alacrity in those two different circumstances? Yes, Eileen.
I think it's not unusual to have a lot of enthusiasm at the beginning of an idea or a project. But once the tedious details and legwork come in, it's easy to lose enthusiasm. So I think you need to have probably enthusiasm at all sorts of mile points in the process in order to get it done.
Yeah, thank you. Well said. Beth.
I always think of alacrity about beginning a project, and it's interesting that you include finishing a project, which is just as important because you need to have the enthusiasm to start the project right away. Like Abraham in the Ikeda, God says, sacrifice your son. He says, okay, we're going right now. He leaves. He doesn't stop and think about it. They go on the trip. And he's ready and to do it, and delaying can cause doubt. So the alacrity made him obedient. And I think recognizing milestones, like she said, is very important too, to kind of celebrate the little accomplishments along the way before the whole project is finished. But completing the thing is important too. If you don't complete it, then the alacrity doesn't matter. The alacrity to begin is lost if you don't have alacrity to finish.
Yeah, thank you, Beth. Liam, I saw your hand for a moment. Have you?
I answered my own question, but thanks.
Okay, Michael.
I'm sitting here and I'm appreciating for the first time that for me at least, both beginning and completing a task involves embracing change. Because I'm taking on something new or I'm letting go of something that has become familiar to me. So I'm recognizing that for me, embracing change is hard. And so that's one way in which this soul trait can really help me.
Fantastic. Yeah, on this topic of completing change, the fourth bullet was the mitzvah. The mitzvah is ascribed to the one who completes it. And a mitzvah is a commandment. Sometimes it's used kind of in a more vernacular of kind of a good deed, but it's really about the completion of the task. And to do just partial or a half-assed job or kind of not getting it done, by that argument, it doesn't really count. And sometimes partial credit is definitely there in life. Like you get some small improvement or some small change definitely counts. But for other things, it's like you either finish fixing the clock and it can tell time again, or you don't, and it just doesn't, until the whole thing is done, until the barbecue's assembled, you can't grill any food. So it doesn't matter that you took all the pieces out of the box. It doesn't help you at all. Yes, Beth, and then Sarah.
My brother was not good at finishing projects, and he often left them unfinished. And when my mother was quite old, we decided as a birthday gift to paint her living room. And to save money, we got the paint and did it ourselves. And my brother was pretty handy, and I could swing a paintbrush back in those days. But at one point he said, well, we're almost done. You go ahead and go home and I'll finish up here. When my mother died, the switch plate covers for the light switches and the electrical outlets still had not been replaced in her living room. To my shame.
Yeah.
So we had alacrity to begin, but not to complete.
Thank you, Beth. Good example. Sarah.
I just think that it's easier to start something than to finish it. And I was thinking of a few different examples, like volunteering to chair a committee with somebody else, and then somebody else drops out and you're left holding the bag, or volunteering to do something and then not taking it all the way. Like it's easier to start something for me than to necessarily carry it through. And I think that that's the important thing. Don't take it on if you're not going to do it, or
Yeah, thank you. Martin and then Kat.
Picking up on Sarah's comment, Da Vinci never finished the Mona Lisa.
All right, there we go. Kat.
I just wanted to give another example, which is for me at work, when I'm starting a project, like starting is the hard part for me. And I feel like it's often my own perfectionism. Like I have a lot of fear around doing things well or doing things perfectly sometimes. So for me, the hesitation comes when starting.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, there's no right or wrong answers for any of these, and I really appreciate how Kat and many of you have kind of shared from the heart of kind of your own approach and challenges with this. And I've been thinking, I've shared in my email today about the getting the book, it's getting the self-published edition out. And I got started pretty quickly, but boy, I had trouble finishing it and completing it and kind of keeping going. And it really took a little bit of an emergency to kind of get me going again. So I think for me, I'm definitely on team hard to complete things and very easy to jump into something. But boy, um, getting hung up, and I think probably perfectionism contributes to that a little bit sometimes. All right, well, let's take a look at the spectrum of enthusiasm. Yes, I wish to continue to share. So the mantra that there's a few good ones for this, but the one that I particularly like is to make the most of each moment. And so before anything else, what does that mean to you to make the most of each moment? And how does it apply to kind of what we've been talking about? Oops, sorry about that. Hey, Beth.
For me, an important part of any project is planning, thinking about it before anything actually happens. It looks like nothing is happening, but you're planning, you're thinking, and sometimes you do it a little bit on paper, draw some sketches, do a chart, make some notes. But it's important to recognize that that is part of the project. It's not that nothing is happening yet. Probably the most important part, planning ahead before you start, so that when you get into the project, you're not pushed to finish it by a specific date, and then you are full of frantic busyness and making rash decisions.
Thank you, Beth. Liam and then Bonnie.
When I came down with MS, things started to slow down for me. And one of the hardest things I had to learn was, instead of trying to do everything and doing it right now, was the idea that what our best is and what the most is at any given moment can be very fluid. And that, to me at least, it's much more about doing what we can while we can or when we can. So sometimes you might be able to get a lot done in a very short time. And, I think you should capitalize on that if you can. But there are other times when really the most of the moment is, putting your feet up and having a cup of tea, and you'll end up being more productive and getting, more done in the long run by taking that moment off than to try and push through it and capitalize on the moment.
Yeah, thank you, Liam. I love that. I think jives really well with kind of some of our discussion for free will too, and Toby's comment about really understanding all of the choices that we have. And sometimes the best choice might be to keep our powder dry and to conserve our energy and to use that moment in a different way rather than just blindly, pushing through. And in the long run, that may be, or even in the medium run, that may not be a wise choice, if I'm understanding you correctly. Bonnie.
So I'm interestingly had no idea what Liam was going to speak about, but some people in the group know that I had cancer again last year, and I'm perfectly healthy now. But what it really was clear to me was that when I'm with my kids or my grandkids or with good friends, to enjoy what I have at that point. To really not think about who's not there or what's going to happen in the future, just to enjoy it. And I have to keep reminding myself that while I'm at very high risk, I am very healthy now. and that I've got a lot of good years that I can enjoy.
So glad you're healthy, Bonnie, and thank you for sharing that. So, with that all being said, let's take a look at the spectrum of enthusiasm. And for each of the different soul traits we work on, our idea is how can we find balance? It's not about having as much possible alacrity or enthusiasm as we could, and it's also not about, trying to minimize this trait. So the information is up on the slide, but I would love to kind of hear from someone who we have not heard from today to kind of talk about what happens if we have sort of maybe starting on that too much side, too much enthusiasm. What's the kind of trap that we can fall into there?
Well, if you have too much enthusiasm, if you just rush and try to get something done, you're probably not going to do a good job.
Mm-hmm.
And it just makes you crazy if you get frantic about something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you, Lisa.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we need one more person to stick their toe in today. What about if we have too little enthusiasm? Someone else we haven't heard from yet today. What is the danger in that case? Yes, Nico.
Sorry, unless someone else wants to talk. I know I've already spoken today, but I would like to point out that at the too little end of enthusiasm, there's also to me something else than slothful and lazy.
Mhm.
There's also doing things without giving it your best, doing things without joy. That's also what the most of each moment tells me. I come from a culture where cynicism and non-implication and lack of joy is very prominent. Um, the French are very negative and very non-enthusiastic people, contrary to Americans, from what I see. And you can also do things like, oh, yeah, okay, I'll do it. So I wanted to point out that to me, at least for me, the lack of enthusiasm doesn't resonate as slothful and lazy. I don't think so, but more as doing things without putting my heart in.
Yeah, I think that's a great additional kind of angle. I mean, not enough enthusiasm. And putting your heart into it is a really, I hadn't thought about it that way, but I think that's a great way to frame it. And also on the too much side, if you put too much of your heart into something, you could end up totally heartbroken over something that's not all that important.
Yes, you can get carried away, I agree, or over invested in something and yeah, lose yourself in it.
Yeah. And as a recovering workaholic who put my heart way too much into work and project works, I mean, it's not that it wasn't important, but it wasn't important enough for me to put my whole heart into it. And so, I focused too much on that and not enough on family and my own health and other things. Um, and ultimately, the workplace cannot return your devotion in any way. It's just not, that's just not how it works, even though sometimes we get a message that it does work that way. Um, all right. Let's see. Now we'll talk a little bit about this topic from the email today, which will be going to lead into our breakout groups. So when I talked about how Alacrity helped turn around this kind of situation where I was sort of shame spiraling and a little bit like Kat's example, where I was just kind of down and depressed and couldn't access my free will and couldn't kind of get going. And so one thing I did was I changed the focus from self to others. And I'm using this example of myself just as an example. I'm fine, not a big issue, but sometimes I create a pseudonym or if a third person or someone told me the story. This time I'm actually telling you the story, as me. So what kind of soul trait? It's one that we covered in prior weeks, and I know some people are here for the first time today. But for people who've been studying Mussar a little bit longer, we know that sometimes you practice one soul trait to help us kind of bring another into balance. So there's changing the focus from self to others. What soul trait is that is involved with that? Yeah, Bonnie.
I think humility.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Humility is that to use Alan Marinis's phrase, no more than my space, no less than my place. It's right sizing yourself in the world. And I was just really pity partying a little bit too much. And when I started thinking about, hey, by the way, there's people emailing you who can't get the book and want to read it and want to use it for their Mussar group. Okay, how about committing to action? What soul trait is most prominent for that, do you think? And as a hint, we've been talking about it today.
Enthusiasm.
Yeah, yeah, this is the classic, all right, got to get going here. And what about making it your top priority? This is one we haven't talked about yet in this cycle. And there's more than one possible answer, but I do have an answer in mind here.
I think of order.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the Hebrew word for order is Seder, which for those of us who celebrate Passover, we have a Seder. It's a ritual where there's a certain order, and we have the Haggadah, the little book, to help us kind of move our way through. And order is, can be about planning and definitely about prioritization. And so, if you make something your top priority, it's hard to procrastinate. If you really kind of stick to it, it's like, okay, this is the first priority. It doesn't mean it was the only thing I did this week, but it was the thing I did first. It's the thing I came back to. Last night when I was like, well, I could just work another 2 hours and finish this, or I could watch TV. Often I don't work in the evenings, but last night I'm like, I got to get this done. So, so I did. So here's the question for our breakout rooms. Changing your focus from self to others to overcome procrastination. When is this suggestion applicable in your life? I mean, something that you're procrastinating about. Would this be helpful? So I invite you to talk this through with your partner, and maybe you can brainstorm um, creative ways to a situation in your lives. Again, the breakout rooms, these are totally confidential. There's no recording, I don't drop in, so you'll be with, one or two other people. So I'm going to stop the share and then I'm going to copy it into the chat and then I'll set you into breakout rooms. Haven't tried, this is a little bit of an experimental question. So, again, there's no right or wrong answers, but it is just a chance to see where this goes. I'm just looking at the groups to make sure we have people with some level of experience in each group.
6, 5, 4.5.
Okay. Okay, the rooms are
Breakout
open.
rooms.
Talk more.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back.
We're back.
You are back. Okay, so we have about 5 minutes left. So we're going to go a little bit of a speed round, but I would love to kind of hear how that experience was for you, any insights you had. And I want to first give Joyce or Carolyn or David and his wife a chance. You are not, yes, I'm putting you a little bit on the spot, but you do not need, you feel free to shoo it away if you like. But I also want to make sure you have a chance to share since we haven't heard from you today.
We had a very nice
Or
visit.
Guy as well.
Come to find out, we share a lot of the same ideas, and we talked about COVID and how damaging that was to our enthusiasm and our get up and go and just get up and get going. You know, it prolongs the agony if we hang back and don't just do it. Just pick up the phone and make that call, or get out of bed and get dressed and get going. So that it was very healthy, very nice conversation.
Oh, so glad to hear
Enjoyed it very much.
Yes. Anyone else amongst the newcomers today?
So Greg, this is Lois.
John Lois.
You may not recognize me. My hair is totally white now. That's since COVID. I decided to leave it this way. I've been in and out of your groups.
Oh my goodness, Lois, yes. So
Yeah,
nice to see you again.
Yes, I always think about you, but Thursday afternoon is usually pretty busy. But this topic really caught my attention, and I know it was relevant to my husband David here too. So we tuned in, and I'm very glad we did. We just had a really nice talk. One of the ladies in our group, she was just about to tell us about this question, what motivates us? And then the time was over, and I wish she would say a few more things that had to do with this whole topic.
Yeah, motivation's an interesting angle on this. Okay.
I didn't get her name, but she's among us.
Was me.
Yes.
That was me, Bonnie,
Yes.
from up the road from you.
So could you just finish that?
Well, I think it has to do with procrastination.
Yeah.
Which is, I was on a national board meeting. In the middle, there was a board activity, and we broke into groups. And the question was, what motivates you? And what motivates me and gets me up every 5 to 6 days a week is to work out. I know Toby is nodding her head because we've had this discussion.
But that would drive me back to bed.
Yes, my mother-in-law famously once said, well, at one point I thought about going for a walk, but I lay down for a while and that urge went away. Martin.
Oh, Greg, it's just, by the way, all the topics you bring up, really motivating. And just to circle back from last week, I think we were talking about patience.
Yeah.
And I just a thought came to me about that. I just wanted to share it before we keep going on week after week. Regarding patience, this is my epiphany about patience. If I'm noticing I'm going to be impatient. When I'm waiting for something to happen, I only need patience if I'm consciously spending energy waiting for a result. That was just my epiphany from last week.
That's very well said. You know, if we're calm, we don't need patience. And sometimes for people who weren't here, we can confuse patience with calm. patience is what we need when we're not calm. If you're not bothered by traffic, you don't need to be patient in traffic. But if you're really getting annoyed, that's when patience comes into play. All right, my friends. Well, we are going to close, as we always do, with another short meditation to close our sacred space for the week. So I invite you once again to close your eyes and take a deep breath through the nose and a nice leisurely exhale. Let's put our focus on the people in this community who've shared the journey with us today. Think about what they've given of themselves for being here, what you've given, and the alacrity that you showed by showing up, by being present, by giving of your listening generously, sharing your vulnerability and your wisdom from a place of generosity. And allow yourself to smile and to experience the joy and the gratitude of being together. And when you're ready, you may open your eyes. Thank you all so much for being here today. If you have watched this recording and made it all the way to the end, thank you so much. Please give the video a like because that'll help encourage YouTube to share it with others.